Hello, welcome to our July 23rd, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test on my end, make sure everything is coming through as expected. Bear with me just a second. Hello, welcome to our July 20th. Okay, that sounds fine. So my name is Greg Undo. I will be the host for today's live stream. If you have not attended a Club Cubase live stream, how it works is you could submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could just simply enter your question in the chat field. So many times when we do this, when asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase and which operating system that you're running, so you can say I'm running Cubase 11 Pro on, Mac OS Big Sur. I'm running Cubase 10.5 Artist on Windows 10. That information is helpful. My ability to answer the questions, I can't answer all the questions in real time. I'll try to get through all the questions as completely and as succinctly as possible. But so if we could try to avoid asking the same question over and over again, so if you don't get an immediate response, instead of just asking the question every couple minutes, that just kind of slows down the whole process. I would appreciate that. Like many people during pandemic, my family's at home, so you may hear my wife, who's working above me, on a conference call. You may hear my son, and I may have an interruption to fix something for my son during the live stream, so I'll apologize in advance for that. So as we do this, if you are watching the live stream live, we could feel free to introduce yourself, tell us where you're from. If this is your first live stream that you've attended, let us know that as well. We will get started here in just a couple minutes, but I want to give a quick shout out to some people that have always been super helpful. So we will have all the topics covered in today's live stream. All the topics will be created in an index, and that will be pinned to the top of the comments field later tonight. So look for that. If you wanted to search for live streams, that were, topics that may have been covered in a previous live stream from, I think we've covered over 11,600 questions. Now, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm is kind enough to compile that site. If you want to search for other resources of great information on Steinberg products and workflows, you can check out the Cubase Nation Discord. And there's all sorts of wonderful information that many people have compiled, including Jazz Dude, who's usually on the live streams. We have two people that serve as moderators. We usually have a very well-behaved group, but just in case there's some moderation that's needed in a discussion ahead of where I am, we have Agent K and Jazz Dude that do that. So just want to give a quick thanks to all of them. I mentioned on the last live stream that Tuesday I will be on a business trip and won't be doing the live stream. So I will be on a plane during when the live stream is happening. So we will continue our live stream on the following Friday. So 1 week from today will be the next live stream. And since that is the last live stream of the month, we'll do kind of a 2-hour live stream and a 2-hour Zoom meetup. So as people want to get an invitation, I'll create a Zoom meetup link after today's live stream. But if you want to email me to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to share that particular link with other people as well. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm sure we'll have lots of questions. Okay, so we have from Daniel question. Hey, Greg, is there a way to troubleshoot syncing your loops in Media Bay with a high buffer size? The loops tend to fall off beat the higher you go. So I saw this question just a minute or two before I got started. So I went to my studio setup and I just kind of set up the my Steinberg UR24C interface. I set it to a buffer size of 2048, which is the maximum buffer. Man, let's go ahead and if I just do this here, let me just bypass a couple of things here so it doesn't sound hideously bad. All right. So let's say if I want to now just sync drum loops at 2048. I'll make this preview a little louder. So it seems like this is even at the highest buffer. I mean, some of the loops. So every loop that I'm kind of doing is just kind of falling. So even at the maximum buffer, anytime that I'm auditioning the loops, they all seem to be playing in sync. So I will safely assume that maybe you have this at the autoplay, and that you have it also set to align beats to the project and for it to be synchronized. But it seems like switching the buffer size doesn't have any impact on my end. So maybe if you could let us know if it's a particular audio interface that you're running into, but doesn't seem to have any impact with this synchronization of loops with the buffer size being raised. Okay, so I just see from Jean-Marc, hi Greg, cross-graded to Cubase 11 Pro from Studio One. Is there an equivalent Cubase to the Project Arranger and Scratchpad in S1 to experiment with song arrangements? So, what we have is just an arranger track. So we could right-click and we can add an arranger track, and we could have one per project. So if I wanted to just add an arranger track, I have one set up in this project. And now all you would need to do is just kind of grab my pencil tool and I can say, I want this part is a guitar solo and I want this part maybe within a section. We could define parts within parts within parts. And once we have these all set up, we could see our different parts here and then we can drag them into the arrangement. If we hit the E button, we can now come over here. You could come up with, I think, 16 different arrangements per project, but we could activate the arranger. So instead of playing in a straight linear fashion, I could just kind of hit play, and this will allow you to experiment with different arrangement ideas. Now we'll jump to, we'll just continue to play. All at once you kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart. Feel good. So now if I wanted to take this linear arrangement and turn it into a non-linear arrangement, I could just say, click on flatten chain, And that will just kind of copy all the parts as if it was a true linear arrangement. We could have that within the current project or have it just automatically create a new project. So try playing around with the arranger track. Okay, so we have a question from Eric Ross. How can I map my MIDI foot pedal to turn a VST plugin on or off? Okay, so we could do this in our generic remote. So let's say I have on, so let's say on our drum loop, I wanted to go to a delay. So let's say I have a mono delay here on my drum loop. And let's say I'll just switch off my play order. Okay, so now. Okay, so now as soon as I have this insert plugin on that particular channel, what I could do now is let's go to our generic remote. And I will say, let's send a note on message. So I'm going to basically just learn. I'm going to hit a MIDI note here. And at this point, we want to say, let's go to command mixer. Let's see if we come here to our VST mixer. And let's say our drum loop. And let's go to our inserts. So I could just, turn this on if I wanted to. So let's say, okay, I just want it to turn on this plugin. So let's say this plugin is turned on or off. I can now just come right over here and just be able to kind of activate plugins. So just come right over here again, and you could just say for this particular insert, and you can see all your different plugin parameters. So if you have that and you wanted to bypass the plugins, you could just kind of come over here. So let's say, so now when I hold that down, the plugin could be bypassed just like that. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to group plugins together so that they can all be turned on or off at once, like Ableton Rack via MIDI foot switch? So I think if we wanted to just come over here, we could choose. So if you wanted to, I'm not sure if you want to do it globally or just on a particular track, but we could, I believe if we do the same generic remote, and I'm not familiar with the Ableton Rack, but if I wanted to come over here, let's just say, okay, so let's go to our VST, maybe under command, and we'll see if it's in here. So now we could just come over here and bypass the inserts just by hitting that generic remote again. So once you come over here, we go to the studio setup, and so let's say fader 1, and I'll just learn that message again. So, and then you could do bypass inserts, or you could probably even do a bypass inserts with a project logical editor function, and you could trigger that with, so let's say if the event is selected, so if I want to select this channel, we could choose to bypass inserts on particular tracks as well. So we could do it several different ways through a project logical editor. So where I could say we want to transform container type is equal to track, and we could say the selected track, the event is selected. And then we could just say inserts bypass. And if you wanted that to toggle, you could just come right over here. And once that's saved as a preset, you could come over here to your studio setup and say, I want this note on message to go to command, and we'll look under process project logical editor, and you would see the preset name there. So there's several different ways to kind of skin the cat per se. I'll leave that up so in case you need to pause while I look for the next question. And so kind of in the same vein, can I map 4 MIDI foot switches to control Cubase transport controls? Also, can I set those switches up to do loop recording and overdub? So yeah, same exact concept here with the generic remote. So I think once you kind of get into this, we could say, okay, this I would go to and look under transport, and we could say device. So this MIDI message is start, stop, record, all of your typical transport functions. So this way, each of these MIDI notes coming from this port can do these particular functions that you've defined. And you kind of set that up once and you're all good. All right. Great to see that Jan from Cubase Index could make it. All right. And we have Detlef from Dusseldorf. Okay, so we have a question. Is reamping a workflow that can be done directly in Cubase? So if you're not familiar with what reamping is, it's often where maybe you record a dry guitar part. Let's see if I may have kind of an example of this in a project. Just open it. Just open. Okay, so reamping is often kind of taking a guitar part that has maybe been recorded through that was going to an amplifier, and then maybe you don't record the amplifier signal, but you record the actual signal of just a guitar. So the guitar will actually often be just recorded. So let's take a look at these two guitars here. So let's say if I just, that's what those two guitars sound like. So these were recorded dry. So when, so we're playing it through a guitar amp, but it wasn't recorded through an amp, and we recorded the guitar signal. So reamping is often taking the output. So what people will do is to take the output of this and send it to a guitar amp. So you take the output from your audio interface, send it to a guitar amp, record this signal back as an audio track. So while you could do it quite easily in Cubase, you do have to kind of send the signal out to the amp to re-record it, and that's often what reamping is. But if you wanted to use the software, like these guitars are using the VST amp rack that comes with Cubase. So when we come over here, and if I wanted to just bypass these two. So if you're tracking a guitarist and you don't necessarily like their amp, often the trick to do is, and I've done it to dear friends of mine, where it's, you hook up a DI box between their guitar and the amp, and you tell them it's for impedance. and they'll kind of buy it, and they still hear what they're sounding like. And you could record like one track of the amp if you want, and another track of dry guitar, and then run that dry guitar through plugins, or send the signal to an output of your audio interface. So let's say if I come here, I'll just define an output. I'll go to my audio connections, and let's say in this interface I want to add a mono bus. So I want to say, okay, outputs 3 and 4 or whatever. I want to send the guitar to the mono output, and at that point the signal, the dry guitar signal, is sent to the amplifier. You set up a microphone to record that as an audio track directly back into the system. So technically, to do it, it can't be done all in software, but you could do it quite easily. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, and we have Tanch 012 from Australia. Thanks for joining us. We realize it's really early or really late there. All right, we see Agent K and Jazz Dude. Okay, so just see question. Has anyone come across an issue in updating from Cubase 11.01 to 11.02? My high and low pass pre-filter stopped working. So, the latest version is 11.03. So when I just want to come to, let's say, our guitar part here, so I'll just solo the guitar, and let me just pan it. So make sure that you turn it on. So it seems like that's all. I'll just do it on maybe a smaller project so you could hear it as well. So let's just try. All right, so say we'll take this guitar part. So yeah, make sure, one, that you have it turned on first, but, give that a shot, and check out, try updating to 11.03 as well and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, great to see Christian D68 and Michael Pierce on the live stream. All right, we have Ted Springman from Sherman Oaks. Okay, so we see Taylor Sapp from Pine Grove. Sometimes when I move tracks to a new folder and then rename the folder, all of the tracks in the folder take on the name of the folder. What causes this, and how can I prevent it? Okay, so let's do a quick project here, which I know has some folders. Okay, so I'll take these out of the folder. Okay, so let's call our folder Taylor. And now I want to move those tracks into the folder. So I don't see any of the names changing, but let me. Okay, so now I'm going to rename the folder. All right. Okay, so let's see if maybe, maybe Taylor, I'm not sure if you have like these tracks still selected. And let's say if they're, maybe if the tracks are selected and the folder was renamed. But it doesn't seem like it's taking on the folder, whatever name I have the folder. The tracks seem to be independent of that. I'll just take a look. I don't know of a preference, but I'll take a quick look. Yeah, but let me know if I did something differently than you, Taylor, but that seems to kind of be working as I would expect, not affecting the name of tracks within the folder when renaming the folder. Okay, great to see Stefan from Sweden and Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. And we have Wolfgang Productions checking in from South New Jersey. All right, question. When releasing music using something like Simon Phillips patterns, should I or could I list Simon Phillips in the credits on the song? I don't think, you don't have to by any ways, but, if you're trying to maybe leverage it as, Simon Phillips played on my production, I don't think there's anything stopping you from preventing that, but, it's, if you're trying to leverage it as, I had Simon Phillips play drums on your song, that some people may consider that a little misleading, but there's no need to credit Simon Phillips if you use his patterns and his sounds. That's kind of what you get when you actually purchase the license for the Simon Phillips drums. Okay, so we had from Christian D68. Thank you for the tips concerning timecode based markers and warping the measures. I get slowly into it, but a little confused concerning warp quantize on and off. Can you shortly explain it? Okay, so excuse me. Let's come over here to our video project. So I believe the question was trying to maintain the markers at their SMPTE timecode position. So let's say if we have markers, and as I wanted to do markers for a particular scene, I will add cycle markers here. So let's say I'll just add some cycle markers. Okay, so now we have cycle markers, and I want this to be, perhaps an even number of measures. So once we have this done, let's say I need, this marker to be to start right at measure 31, and I need the music measure 40. Let's say measure 41 needs to end at the end of this marker. So this is kind of what we do. So we don't have to do any kind of quantizing or warp quantizing, but there is a tool that's called the time warp tool. And what this is going to allow us to do is once we place these into linear mode, because as I would change tempos, if the marker track is in musical mode, it will stay at its current bar and beat position. But if it's in linear mode, it stays at its time position. And if you don't see that, right click and go to your track control settings, and you'll probably see toggle time base in the hidden controls. So if you don't see that option, just move that, right click again, and choose that you want the track controls that you want to toggle time base. So once it's in linear mode, then I could grab the time warp tool and move the time warp here to automatically fit the different measures. So I could say measure 41 needs to end right where that marker ends. And this way I could have 8 even measures, and this will do a quick tempo adjustment. So if I look at my tempo track, let's see if I have one already. So when I see my tempo track here, and let's say I now want I want measure 37 to be right there. So as we adjust measure 37 and move that directly to where the end of the bar is, you'll see that the tempo information here adjust so that you could, very easily just say, okay, measure 37, you end right there. And this way we could have an even number of measures between those events. So this way the markers stay in the same spot, but we just adjust the measures to fit kind of our in and out points. And that way we can have an even number of measures, and you won't have a bunch of 7/8 bars or 15/16 bars, just to kind of make some stuff work musically within a video edit where the timing wasn't really, they weren't thinking about how it's going to work with the music. It'd be someone else's fault. All right. Okay, so we have Oxy1 checking in from Holland. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question. Does revert reset the project since it's been opened or since it's been created? So it revert, and you see me do this a lot, and when I want to take a project back to kind of a known status point. So revert goes back to the last saved version of that project. So it's the last, so it's not since it's been created or not since it's been opened, but it goes back to the last saved versions. Okay, we have a question from Jay from Connecticut. How should I set up expression maps templates so that I could save multiple of VST instrument types like guitars, so that I could use a single set of switches for all guitars from different brands? So you may have to go into, so if you wanted to do that, what a lot of people may do is set up, you could set up, your expression map if you really want it to have different articulations that are going to different instruments. So I know some people will do that. Some people will set up their templates because they may want different scenarios, and they may just say, okay, I wanted to take like these 3 guitar parts and put it into a folder. So say if we put like our guitar parts in our template, and we'll just call it guitar articulations. Okay, so now we could have, let's say we have these tracks within this folder. So I'll come here, select this, move it. And what you could do is, have the individual articulations and just simply record and enable the folder track, and then each of these could be set up, and you could, perhaps if you have conflicting depending upon the library. So a lot of people would do this so that they could have one folder and then have all the guitar parts, and then they could just play the sound in, and it would send MIDI information to all of the different tracks. All right, so we have great to see Terry Dean, and we have Luthier47 from Atlantic City checking in. Sable Winters, always better when Sable's here. So I just see a question from Michael Pierce. Is this a new demo song for the Cubase Hangouts? So if it's the Feel Good song, it's one that I've used, and it's also written by Vince Melamed, who wrote Be Someone, and also wrote Beatles and Stones. So all right, so we have Got Fiddler checking in from Oregon, and I see John Koskin on the live stream. All right, and we have Latoria Clinton from Houston, Texas. Great for you to join us. All right, so I just see from Samuel, can you split note in your required values like MPC split MIDI note in 7? So I'm not familiar with the MPC split MIDI note in 7. But let's see if I could maybe just take a quick look and say, so let's say if I have a long note here and if I wanted to split it, so a lot of times people will come here and just, you could cut notes. So let's say I could take the grid on or off. So let's say I take snap on and off. So if I split the note here, this would give us 2 separate notes. But if I hold down the Alt or Option key, so so if I hold down the Alt or Option key, I can then split at whatever interval that I want. So if I just hold down Alt or Option with the pencil tool, that will just now make a bunch of evenly, like one note, and evenly split it at whatever interval that you go from the previous note start. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding, because I haven't worked with an MPC in 31 years or so. So since MPC 60 times, so it's been a long time. All right, so we see okay, so just see, hi Greg, is it possible to create custom chords in Cubase? Some 3-note extension chords don't transfer to the chord track. So, what you could do, if you wanted to, let's say we have a chord track. And there could be many different schools of spelling of chords, but you could get, you can get pretty adventurous. So you say, okay, I want this. So I think, just about, if you could let us know like what specific chord you're doing. But, one of the things that people also miss is that if you just have your MIDI input turned on and just kind of play a chord, I'll just randomly put chords in, that will tell you the chord that you've made. And sometimes if you go into preferences, you can adjust kind of like chord name spelling. So if you want to do stuff like, maybe there could be different schools of thought and theory with chord spelling. So if you wanted to go, Let's go to in your preferences and event display chords that you could create your own new custom chords here. So you could say, okay, I want this to be, a major third, with fifth. So you could come up with custom chord voicings and spellings there as well for different genres of music. All right, so great to see Soren from Sweden. All right, and we have Peter checking in from Montreal with some kind words. Thank you. All right, so we see Oren Bynum on the live stream. Let me just find his question again. Sorry, just finding my spot. Okay, so we have from Oren Bynum. Hi, Greg. Please show how I can send my Cubase project to you step by step to your email. So probably, if it's going to be just MIDI information, you could send, you could just save the project and attach that in your email program. If it's going to contain audio files, probably the easiest way to do this is to do a backup project. And once you do a backup project, you create a new folder. So I will come right over here. So let's call it Oren. Once that's been done, we could say, okay, we're going to give it a project name. I'll call this one Oren. We could minimize audio files. So generally, like most of the default settings here would be fine. So if you had like a bunch of vocal takes that you didn't use, there's no need to send those to me. And then hit OK, and this will copy everything into one folder. Now, most times when you email attachments to people, it could be, if it's over 10 megabytes big, which is pretty small for sharing projects, that, and it won't fit in an email attachment. So you may want to look at a service like WeTransfer and then take that whole folder and upload it and share the link with me. But so it could depend exactly on how big the file is, but try doing a backup project, save it to a new folder, and you want to upload that to a service. It could be Google Drive or Dropbox or WeTransfer or something like that, are popular ones for sharing files, Oren. Looking forward to hearing it. All right, so I see that Michael Teams has made his appearance, so free ice cream for everyone. All right. All right, so I just see from Christian D68, Greg, my screen resolution is not as normal, cannot read your screen. So I haven't changed anything. So my screen, sometimes when we see that, maybe if you refresh your web browser, sometimes it could be just the downstream. So but I haven't really changed anything. But if anyone else has noticed that the quality is off, everything's kind of the same on my end. So so let us know of other people. All right, so I see question from Jay. I'm struggling to get here universal audio interface to use control room properly due to on interface monitoring in headphones. So I can currently only receive talk back from VST Performer. Okay, so all right, so it says I'm struggling to hear universal audio interface to use control room properly due to on interface and monitoring headphone. So I can currently only receive talkback from VST Performer. So, it should be, try, so I don't have the universal audio interfaces. I know they're popular and, but sometimes it could be just maybe routing within their mixer software. But the one thing, but as long as you have, it should be independent of what's going on. So first thing is, if you're doing VST Connect, you want to just kind of start off with, I think, Jay, you have the VST Connect Pro, but, make sure that you just kind of do create VST Connect within the project here. So as soon as we kind of have that done, so it should be like on the performer's end, as long as they have their interface configured, you should be able to at that point, send the control room where you'll have, under the inserts, you'll see the VST Connect Performer. And you want to make sure that control room mix is being sent out to the performer. So make sure that you have the control room mix. So it shouldn't really have an impact on with settings on your audio interface. But if it's being routed to an internal DSP, you might have to try to bypass that out of curiosity. Maybe some other people have some suggestions that have the universal audio hardware. Okay, I see Jazz Dude's mentioning a great point that, there is one more week. There's a 40% off updates and Cubase promotion for Studio Weeks promotion. So if you've been thinking of jumping into Cubase, and this ends, I think, on August 1st, 2021. So make sure that you take advantage of that. If you've been saving money for the summer sale, it's on and it's only lasting a little more than 1 week. Okay, so we have Tyrone checking in from Atlanta, Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. So we see a question. Hello, Greg, is from John Costigan. Can I use a passive matching plus unbalancing transformer to reamp or a radial active box? Thanks. Sometimes it could really depend upon the amplifier. I've seen plenty of people just take the line level out of the amp. They may have to adjust the gain structure, maybe turn it up or turn it down a little bit than what they're getting out of the guitar. But for the most part, the interfaces are pretty forgiving and the guitar amps are pretty forgiving, but you could adjust the gain of the signal going out of Cubase, from the mix console if needed, or you could boost it. And even if you needed to boost it, significantly, you could just come over here and add pre-gain, to the particular track. So, but if you have, the like a radial DI box, that will always be put to good use as well. All right, so we see Agent K is on top of some moderation for us. Thank you for that. All right, so we see David M. from Liverpool. All right, great to see you on the live stream. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. And if you learn something new, make sure you hit the like button. Or if you just want to be generous, you could do that as well. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, I see. According to Lee Morris, we're missing the Olympics opening ceremony. It'll be on YouTube, so you'll be okay. Michael Teams is passing on his ice cream flavors, his legendary ice cream flavors. All right, great to see Matt from London. Going through all the comments here. All right. So is it possible to send a project from Cubase to Cubase in one folder, but separate? So generally, all you have to do is there's a Cubase project importer, and then really so I'm not sure if it's when you say in one folder but separate, but if at that point you could just come over here if you wanted to take the Cubase project. Once you download the Cubase project importer, you could then just come right over here to import Cubase project. So, and then that project will just load right up. Okay, so great to see Gareth on the live stream. His question is it possible to mute certain channels for master export in the export queue, i.e. export multiple versions in the queue with different channels muted? Okay, so I think, let me just take a quick look. I may have a project that's kind of along these lines. Okay, so I think what you could do, Gareth, is couple kind of a project logical editor preset with this. So let's say if I have a number of tracks kind of all going on here. Okay, so let's say I just wanted to mute these tracks. So let's say when I go into my export audio mix down, now there is a little function here. So when we go to multiple, okay, so we could do a sync selection. This little icon here is sync selection to channel track selection. So let's say if I now wanted to come over here, let's go to project logical editor, and I may have done something similar to this already. Okay, so I did one, so we had a lot of people that were doing templates. So I could, and one of the things that we want to do, if people didn't have a particular, if they had like tracks that didn't have anything on it, I created a preset for select tracks with events. So, but what I want to do is maybe to select tracks that are not muted. Okay, so what I want to do is to now Okay, so if I wanted to, exclude, I'm just going to reread the question here. Okay, so all right, so is it possible to mute certain channels for master export in the export queue, i.e., export selected multiple versions in a queue with different channels muted? So currently, if you have them muted, it's not going to be included. But if I run this logical editor preset, I could say we're going to select everything, and my percussions that were muted here, we could now sync the selection, and at that point the selection won't include like our congas and our talking drum or shaker, because those weren't selected based upon this. So I made just a quick project logical editor, and we said we're going to select container types equal to track and the property is not set to event is muted. So anything that was muted, we can now do a batch export and have that automatically stored. And I know some people will go as far as to take mix console snapshots for different scenarios. So you could just say, okay, I want it to come here and take a snapshot of that mix console. And let's say now I want it to take a snapshot of that mix console. And now I could say, let's recall snapshot 1. And then you could just kind of come right over here and be able to toggle back and forth between different mix console snapshots. So that's something that you could take a look at as well. So saving various mute states within mix console snapshots. And this way you could print this, and if you just had it muted without doing the sync selection, it would just write empty tracks, which doesn't do anyone any good. But this way, once you go to the export audio mixdown, you could at this point just choose the sync selection, and that will allow you to take those particular tracks and have it ignored when doing a batch export. So let me know if that works for you, Gareth. All right, and just finding my place in a discussion, it just jumped on me. Bear with me just for a moment. Okay, found my spot, just reading through comments. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimers is thanking me for answering a question he was going to ask, but someone asked it first. Love how this works, so it's great. Okay, so we have a question. Are you able to use Cubase 11 Pro as a film editor too, or just adding audio to a pre-edited clip? It's really designed not to be a video editor, but for, working with audio for, for adding audio to a pre-edited clip. You could do some basic editing. So if you have a particular, if you needed to, in a pinch, So let's say if I'm here in my video and all of a sudden you get a call from the director that they cut out this particular scene, I could grab maybe like the range selection tool. So let's say if I just wanted to globally select all of this information. So if I come over here and cut, let's say I go to my range and do a global, let's say I just crop, I'll just delete time. So that will cut out that part of the video, but it's not going to be doing dissolves. It's not going to do color correction. So, in a pinch, if you really need to, if you're composing and someone gave you like the in and out times and said, we made a cut here, you could do it, but it's really, as you mentioned, just designed more for adding the audio to an existing video clip. All right, so great to see Scott Bogfoot from Newfoundland. All right, so we just see how can I use Yamaha styles with Groove Agent? So what a lot of people will do, I'm not sure, what styles they are or what keyboard. So if it's like for a Tyros or a Genos or a Montage or a PSR, but as long as so the styles themselves. As long as you could get the MIDI information out of the device, some arranger workstations are really designed to have it only use the internal sounds because they spend a lot of time, optimizing it for this particular drum set. So you have kind of seamless transitions. But if you could record, but if you have the ability of recording what is being generated out of the instrument as MIDI, you could then send that to any instrument like Groove Agent. A lot of kind of keyboard workstations tend not to do that. And they kind of, trigger a pattern internally, but that internal pattern can't be sent outside. So you would need to get that MIDI information directly into the sequencer, directly into Cubase to use it with Groove Agent. Okay, so we're just seeing other people saying that video quality is okay for them. Okay, so we have a question. Would you go through the process of taking a composite track into Very Audio? So, yeah. All right, so let's say if I have a comped track here. All right, so let's say we'll just be. All right, so when we do this, what we're actually seeing is kind of when we have like a cycled recording that we've done comping on, if you did it in a continuous cycle, this is actually not separate individual files. These are different segments. So this is actually one long audio file that's kind of mapped out. So if I've done comping, what I tend to do, first thing I do a lot of times when just working with vocals is I will, and there may not be a great reason for this. It's just perhaps a workflow. I will come over here and I'll just duplicate the track that I'm working on. So if I've done my comping, and a lot of times I may just treat this as, so let's say I come over here and I grab my hand tool and I do comping. All right. And this is ideal performance, let's say, and that's my perfect take. So when dealing with this with Very Audio, if it's separate takes, you would have to kind of do each of these segments independently because they're all separate audio files. And we could think of Very Audio as being for, a particular, it's going to be more file based. So what I would do is I would do the comping first. And what I would do is once everything is kind of set up and I still have all of my original takes here, I would then, once I feel I had my comp, settled, at that point, I would choose to bounce selection. So I can go to audio and we'll say bounce selection. I'll replace the event. So now, instead of dealing with, I double click, I have one audio file. And at this point, when I go to Very Audio, I don't have to switch between multiple segments. My original audio is still here and can still be comped, all the different parts are there, but this way I'm not doing Very Audio switching between, 8 different performances. It's all kind of been consolidated. So I would do the comp where you feel pretty confident with the comp, and then bounce selection, replace the events, and do the tuning at that point. So that's how I would do it. You could do, each individual event, each individual selection of different lanes as independent ones. But, a lot of times when you're doing tuning, at that point, it's pretty settled as to what parts you're using, and it's easier to kind of have it all in one particular screen so that, you have some context with previous edits. Right. All right, just going through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. You learned something. Make sure that you actually hit the like button. Okay, so we just see if I have Cubase 11 Pro, it's from Grant Nicholas. I hope you're doing well, Grant. If I have Cubase 11 Pro, which version of Performer does a recipient need? So if you're doing VST Connect Performer, there's only one version of the VST Connect Performer. So, how it works is you have the VST Connect as part of Cubase, and we can see it under the VST Cloud. So you have VST Connect SE that comes with the program and VST Connect Pro, and that one is sold separately. So this will allow you to record 2 tracks. This will allow you to record up to 16 tracks. For the end user, they just get VST Connect. They get VST Connect Performer, and it's the same software for the person that's being recorded. They just download the same software. So to them, and the features, the special features are unlocked as you're doing the recording from the engineer's end. So this way, the performer, if they're not like computer savvy or they're not very technical, they could just connect a microphone to an audio interface and it could be all managed from the engineer side. So for the person that's doing the recording, they just need VST Connect Performer. There's only one version of that. And you want to just make sure that when you do that, that you have the same kind of version numbers. Some people may have an older version of VST Connect Pro or VST Connect SE that might be older than the current version that the person you're recording has downloaded. Just make sure that the 2 versions are in sync. But there's only one version for the VST Connect Performer that the actual musician is using. Okay, so we see from Cubase Junkie, I don't know if I should upgrade from Cubase 11 to Nuendo. I do want to get into video editing. So the intention of either program is not for video editing. So if you upgrade it, you could have 2 video tracks at once as opposed to 1. You have 2 video tracks in Nuendo as opposed to 1, but it's not going to give you video editing. That's not really Steinberg's expertise. Ours is going to be in audio and music production and instruments and mastering. So, and if you're looking for a video editing solution, there's lots of them available. Even check out like DaVinci Resolve is very popular. Choice that you could get into free of charge. All right, so we have Mark checking in from Nairobi. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we see from Randy Lee, I need to upgrade, but still can't get Cubase to run on my machine. Every other DAW will run, but not eLicenser or Cubase still. So if you want, Randy, send me a message, and I'd be happy to kind of take a look at your system. But I thought you said in a live stream maybe 6 weeks ago or so that you got it all figured out. So I thought you were okay with that. But feel free to reach out to me at Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so Gareth wants people to become more like whackers. All right, so we see any surface controller for Cubase out there. So there's lots of control surfaces. If you want like the creme de la creme, you could think of a Yamaha Nuage. It's really expensive and it's amazing integration and workflow. There are, we do have a Steinberg CC121, which is a single fader controller with an AI knob and knobs for EQs. That's, I think that most people have it, absolutely love it. It's kind of nearing its end of life cycle. So if you could still find one, that's a great controller, but pretty much anything will work, from a MIDI controller keyboard to, Mackie control devices, anything that's running Yukon, they'll pretty much all work directly with Cubase without issues. All right. Wonderful to see Daryl from Oakland, and always great to have Pablo on the live stream. All right, so we have Charles K from the UK. Great to see you on the live stream. So a question, are we going to see any updates on the collaboration features of VST Cloud, VST Transit? So I haven't heard of any developments, but, usually they don't do major work in between, new versions. So we'll have to see if there'll be new stuff that's going to be handled in the next major release with that. But there's a lot of people using it very happily. So. Okay. We just come back and. All right, so and just kind of a follow up on the Surface controller. All right, so I just see kind of a follow up question to that. I'm curious why there is none with some XLR inputs, and so generally, there's there are some audio interfaces that will have control capabilities. So it used to be like 15, 20 years ago, a lot of people thought, okay, I would get a control surface, a mixer, and an audio interface all tied together. The M Audio had one, Yamaha had one called the O1X. And, that product category tends not, while it seems like a no-brainer solution to a manufacturer, it tends not to sell well because it ends up not being necessarily a great audio interface, a great control surface, or great, a mixer. So there are a number of, mixers that will allow you to record directly in and use it as a control surface. So, but I think Behringer has some, there's a lot of kind of entry level digital mixers that will allow you to do that. But a lot of times control surfaces don't pass audio. They're just controllers. So that's why you don't see XLR inputs, because most people will have an audio interface already. Or most people, so instead of buying another audio interface to get a control surface, you may want to have your audio interface, your mixer, and your control surface kind of decoupled from each other. So that's probably one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of it set up that way. All right, so we just see, how did you manage storage in the VST Transit? So let's take a look. All right, so, there is kind of you have an allocated amount of space that you could use. I think it's maybe monthly. But you can purchase additional storage plans. So if you find yourself coming over here and working on particular projects and uploading particular projects, at that point you could, and you're doing this type of work a lot, and this will allow you to just take this project and say, okay, we're going to take this, and I need to have more storage options. I believe that there are different storage plans available for more bandwidth for uploading, downloading. All right, so we just see from Scott Bogfoot. As stupid as I know as I know it sounds, but I'll have to ask to find out. What does the logical editor do? All right, so the logical editors, and there's two different ones. There's going to be one for MIDI information, and that's just called a logical editor. And then we're going to have one that's a project logical editor. So what these are going to allow you to do is let me just enter in some quick MIDI data here. Is the logical editors allow you to set up different conditions. So let's say I want to take on MIDI, I wanted to take the notes here, and I want to, instead of having to copy these, I wanted to double the notes up an octave. So I could say I want to select all the notes, and I want to insert a note and add 12 to it. So that would automatically take my phrase and double it up an octave. I could take every other note on a hi-hat and increase or decrease the velocity. I could take all tracks that have the letters DR, like for drum, or KI, SNAR, and all tracks that have these letters in a name, and colorize them. So you could create a condition and then you can create an action to perform on that selected criteria that was defined in the condition. So it could be kind of a power user thing. And if you're just kind of getting into it, just play around with, different presets. Like, okay, I want to take every note here and I want it to be a velocity of 100. I could do stuff like that. So it's a lot. I first used it and I was intimidated, in 1992 when I started using it, but I did a whole record. And at that time, we're using it, and it was a budget project. So it was a live band, and we did live recordings with MIDI drums, but real cymbals, which worked out really well, except for every time that the drummer went to his ride cymbal, it would send a false, like a trigger to the tom pad below. So every time the drummer went to the ride, and we didn't necessarily hear it like during tracking, but when you're doing editing, we could find that, there was like little soft sounding tom-toms that were mimicking the actual drums, the cymbals. So I set up a condition and said, any time that there is a note that's a soft note, let's say a velocity less than 50 on this tom, I want you to delete that note. So instead of going through, 50 minutes of tom-toms and looking for the ones below velocity of 50 that were an unintended false trigger, I used a logical editor to do that for me. So that's kind of the intentions of the logical editors. But, play around with some of the presets and, you can pretty easily backward engineer. It seems, it's a very much a Boolean. If this and this and this scenario, I want to do this to that. So it could be kind of a bit almost like programming on a very macro level. Okay. Okay, just finding my spot again. Okay, so just see we need affordable quality converters / preamp surface controllers. Yeah, I mean, they tend not to sell well. So you don't, while it was a very active, product category years ago, it's just not so much today. So you kind of, as I said before, they kind of end up being a bad audio interface, a bad control surface, and a bad mixer. But but there are companies that do it and they work with Cubase. So, all right. So just see from Gareth the sync selection. This is in the batch export audio is the revelation of the day. So. Right, reading through more comments. All right, so I just see O2R96 should have been redesigned as a Cubase controller. So it works great as a Cubase controller into mixer. So you could also get an O1V96. So, those already work as controllers and have for, 20 plus years. So if you wanted to get those to work as a controller, you could just kind of come right over here and, you could have, your Mackie control, Mackie Huey. You could use iPad apps, but O1V96s, O2R96, DM2000, DM1000. So, those integrated control surfaces and audio interfaces and mixers, already work really well. Okay, so just see, can we export charts from Cubase to Dorico, for example? So if you have, everything kind of set up. So let's say I have my project here. So let's say I wanted to take this score and export that. So we could export this directly as a standard MIDI file, but if we've done a lot of work with page layout and stuff like that, all we would need to do if we wanted to take the score, kind of, we could think of this more as like the picture of it. But we could take the score and export it as a music XML file, and the music XML file can be imported directly into Dorico. And that way, if you've done worked painstakingly on your slurs and your titles and page numbers and articulations and dynamics, those would all be carried over, whereas those wouldn't be necessarily transferred over in a standard MIDI file. So to get to Dorico, just simply come right over here. So if you have the lead sheet, just simply come directly over here and export it as a music XML file. Okay, so I just see from Popescu Gabriel, how can synchronize FPS video, I guess frames per second video, with BPM audio from another file? So how to synchronize, so let's say if we have video. So I'm not sure if I totally understand the question, but if I wanted to take a video file here, so if let's say we have our video file, and we're just kind of, so if you want to figure out like the tempo, like let's say, okay, from this scene, I want the video to play back. I could lock the video here, and I can say, come if I need to figure out like the BPM of the video. So what a lot of people do is just kind of use the time warp tool, which kind of looks like the triangle here. And I can say, this is where measure 13 is, and I need measure 16 to be here. And you could just come right over here and just say, okay, this is, measure 19 starts here, and I need 4 measures of data to go to right here. And at that point, We could also just have the video, if we enable use video file as transport mode, that as we do this, we could just have kind of like as we make changes, we could see the video kind of update frame by frame. So you can say, okay, I need measure 24 to be right here. So I could just move measure 24 and that will adjust the tempo. So let me know if that's what you mean by synchronize FPS video with BPM audio from another file. So. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is jumping out to do his tutoring. All right, so we just see more discussion on, audio interfaces and control surfaces. Yeah, so, if you see, and I just see a comment, I missed a days, I looked at a meter bridge. Yeah, I mean, check out, you can probably get a Yamaha O2R96 for a great deal. There's lots of them on the used market as well. And we see Jazz Dudes mentioning Cubase has a meter bridge already. See Randy's going out for Mexican food. All right, so Gareth is giving a big shout out to the Supervision metering plugin. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a shortcut to toggle Vari Audio on and off? So if you wanted to hear what it sounds like without the Vari Audio changes, let's take a look. So I'm going to enable. So let's say I did all these. I did a bunch of tuning in Vari Audio for all these files. All right. So at this stage, I think you could do a reset pitch changes and then undo the reset pitch changes. So try just doing that. You could reset pitch changes for selection or reset all changes for selection. This is just from the functions menu. Okay, so I just see from Randy Lee, I need to upgrade to artist to get the free pro upgrade. However, Cubase still won't run on my machine. E-licenser issue, I can move between machines, right? So yeah, you could definitely move between different machines with the e-licenser. Okay, so we see, can I record the MIDI information out of my Yamaha 3000 PSR to Groove Agent directly, and how? So I'm not sure if the PSRs, I think, and I could confirm over the weekend with some of my Yamaha colleagues, but I think a lot of the PSRs don't output the patterns for the drums as MIDI. So it's kind of, I think, limited to being internal, but I could check with that particular model, the 3000 PSR, to see if it actually transmits the MIDI information, but a lot of those aren't designed to transmit the MIDI information out. So it's a limitation of the hardware where it's designed to only really work directly with the internal components. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, how can I humanize a MIDI track? Okay, so let's say I'll just do a new project here. Thanks for all the great questions. I'll just try a quick retro log here. Let me just check my routings here really quickly. Sorry about that. All right, let's do new project. Okay, so there's a number of ways to kind of humanize different parts. So let's say, okay, so I'll just do like the world's worst drum program. Let me just change my preference here really quick. Okay, so let's say I'll just put in like a horrible drum program. All right, so let's say, all right, so let's say I just wanted to come over here. Let's say, so if I wanted to just come directly over and say, okay, let's just take this part. You could come one way if you want to take just the feel of it and humanize it is you can go to the quantizer plugin and you'll see a swing value. And you could add a groove. You could also, do stuff like, okay, I want to take like every other hi-hat and make it softer. So, but there's also, once we have the part selected, if you go under MIDI modifiers, you could choose to kind of randomize position. It's like extreme changes here. So you can say the maximum, and minimum values. So there's different randomizing, different elements here for, for position, pitch, velocity, length that you could apply as well, all within the MIDI modifiers. And if you don't see the MIDI modifiers, just try to come over here, right click, and just make sure you see a check, and then the MIDI modifiers will go up. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks again for all the great discussion. Okay, so just see, is it difficult to sync audio with a video clip? Is there a method for doing it? So we'll jump back. So one of the things that you could do that can make a big difference is if you go to the transport menu, there's a function called use video edit, use video follows edit mode. And now that if I move an event here in the timeline, then I'll just turn my snap off by hitting the letter J. Anytime that I move an event, whether it's an audio file or MIDI note, so if I come over here, let's just put in, so I have this event. So now if I wanted to place this precisely with video, all you have to do is as you move the event, the video will update frame by frame. So you could just come right over here, and kind of spotting stuff to video is super fast and easy using that. So if I don't have that turned on, I could move the event and I don't really see the video reflected, but with that enabled, I could move both events simultaneously. So I move one, I see it immediately reflected in what's going on with the video. So that makes it super easy to kind of place different sounds with the video. All right, so we have Emmanuel checking in from Bucharest, Romania. Thanks for joining us. And Jeff Sabelski is made it from Chico, California. We see Zofo's just upgraded to Pro, and we have Midnight Shadow checking in from Ireland. All right, so we see, guys, you need to seek for a solution economically positioned between the nuage. Thanks for the info in the Studio 164. So, you can check out like an Oven V96. It's a great solution as well. But there's, lots of other companies that make stuff that work great with Cubase. So. All right, so John Costigan asks if the connection on the CC121 is USB or Firewire, so it's just USB. All right, so question is, when closing down Cubase, it often becomes unresponsive and I have to end the task on it. So generally that's going to be a way, generally that's going to be caused by a plugin, perhaps a third-party plugin that's not releasing from memory. So I think if you open up, projects and you could find out that it could be one plugin that's causing it to hang when exiting. So it's like a plugin that's like maybe fell asleep and took a nap and doesn't want to wake up. So you could probably isolate it to one particular plugin and you'd find that to be the culprit with that situation. All right, so we have a question to me. How do I remove a rack, i.e. a Groove Agent rack created on a VST tab? It's impossible to remove it once it's created. All right, so let's say if I come over here to my VST instruments and I have a groove agent. All right, so let's say I've created a MIDI track with it, so it's make sure I have it right. So, all right, so here's my groove agent in the rack. So all you have to do is click into name and choose no VST instrument, and then it'll be removed. So once again, just click in the name and select no VST instrument, and then that rack instance will be eradicated and gone. All right, so we have Joe from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Thanks for joining us. So we have a question. Anyone know when the next release of Cubase is coming out? So, they generally don't announce release dates in advance, but, it's generally when it's all finished and ready, then it's released. So. All right, so I just see from Jess Sabelski, hi Greg, after getting things working again, I can now get the message the plugin Squasher could not be found for insert 1, channel 1 AKG oboe, right after discovering how great it made the oboe sound. So let me know, Jeff, if the Squasher is available. Sometimes, if you uninstalled and reinstalled or did some work with the preferences, maybe if you just go to Squasher and reinstantiate it again and put it on the track again. But let me know if it's showing up in your Cubase, if you're able to put it on other projects or other tracks as well. That'd be helpful information. Glad you made some progress there. Okay, lost my spot, so just kind of finding my space again. Okay, so we see that Pablo's editing drum recordings for Gareth, and that's why he's not as actively in the live stream today. So, all right, so we have a question from Jan. Chord track. When I set MIDI event to follow a chord track, sometimes the chord in the MIDI add a fourth note, a bass note. Can I set it to always only be 3 notes standard chords? Thanks, from Jan. All right, so I think if we go to the chord tracks here, we could go to let me just set up a chord track quickly. Okay, so let's say, okay, so when we go to our chord track, try going to set up voicing, and then you could just say you only want to do triads, and you can say 4-note chords, 5-note chords, or you could probably even just come right over here and under options, just say add root note. And I think that would make the difference for you. So on the chord track itself, Jan, come over here and click on setup voicing. And I think you just want to uncheck add root note. But you could also set the style to just triads. And I think if you do that, and you could set the range for the lowest root note number and the highest note. So if you make that like C2 to, you could, set the range there. So once again, just select the chords and go to setup voicing. All right, so we just see from Tim Weinheimer, what was the last digital mixer Yamaha released? So there's a Rivage. There's a whole Rivage series. They're often used in really large concerts, but they have, I think, like a DM7, and there's always, staples like, M, QL, CL. So, but I think it might be the Rivage 7 was released maybe 15 months ago, kind of like right before COVID pandemic. So all right, great to see Kai Wen Franklin on the live stream. Glad you could join us. So just see from Terry Dean says about upgrades, says, no, that wasn't clever. That was a gesture from Steinberg because the sequencer that came with the O&X didn't work. So I think there's a lot more issues with the O&X at the time. So. All right, so we see Kai is listening to the stream while fighting .NET code issues. So. All right, so we see Christian D68s came from the Atari version, the Cubase 11 Pro, no grace period, had to pay the full price, but surely the best investment since years. So in all fairness, it's probably been about 28 years since they released an Atari version. I guess the last new Atari version was 1994. So. Okay, so we see from Universe Media, is there a way to rearrange the mixer tracks? So the mixer tracks will be tied to the project window. I know it's a common feature request that the developers are quite, aware of, and the planning team. But if I wanted like the bass track to do this, and I think there's, probably less of a need since the mixer's in the lower zone. But if I just move the bass track, let's say to the top here, I could do that and it's reflected in the mixer. But unfortunately, you can't just kind of drag the channels and rearrange them in the mixer view. It has to be done in the project window view currently. All right, so to see need help, I bought an Artist Education 10.5, which got bumped into up to Artist 11 by the provider on registration. But now my Artist 11 won't upgrade to Pro on weekend deals offer. So let me know if sometimes there's a difference between update and upgrade. So depending on which one you bought, it can be confusing. So let's say if I go to like the Steinberg website here. So as long as you have the Artist 11 license, I'll come over here and okay, so let's say I just want to do buy Cubase 11 Pro. So make sure that you're doing updates and upgrades, and you want to make sure that you're not doing an update, but the upgrade here. So make sure that you're doing this one as opposed to the update. But if you have any, if you're still having issues with it, you could contact support. I don't have access to particular information for registrations and licenses for their customers that a customer support does, unfortunately. So okay, just reading through more comments. You say Gareth was kicked out of every school. Okay, so I just see from Stanley, I wonder why we don't have Bezier curves in note expression. So yeah, currently there isn't the note, the Bezier curves for note expression, but I think you could turn the note, let's see if there's a logical editor preset that might be able to turn the CC data into note expressions. And I think a lot of the note expression stuff is kind of performed live into the sequencer. But let's see if we can maybe come up with a way of taking what is normal CC data and converting it. So there's a number of, so you could, create MIDI expression from VST3 volume, create VST3 tuning one shot. So, there are some ways to take normal CCs and convert it directly into note expression. So. Okay, just all right. Yeah, so I see Jazz Dude just commenting on. I saw his comments on the infected mushroom video. So if you want to check out the new infected mushroom video and the Steinberg Spotlights, so we'll be shooting another Steinberg Spotlights next week. I'll be in Los Angeles for a couple days working on that. right, so we see Cubase Junkie was like 5 years old when Cubase came out in '89. So makes me feel old now. So okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. And make sure you hit the like button if you learned something new or just want to support the live streams, and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done that, you can be notified. I see Christian D68 talking about Calamus on Atari TT computers. So brings back memories. All right, so we have Michael checking in from Athens, Greece. Okay, so we have a question from Uncle Tone Beats. Hey, Greg, I'm having a brain fart on copying a sample from Groove Agent SE to place it into a sample editor. So I think I'm not sure if we could, I think you could, it's designed more to get it into Groove Agent SE, but let's go ahead and just take a quick look here. I will open this up. All right, so okay, and place it into the sample editor. So like the patterns can be dragged. So if you have patterns, these can be dragged onto the time window. But I think once the pattern is here, that the kind of the intention is that you would do the sample editing here. And not necessarily leave kind of the Groove Agent environment. I could be wrong, but let me just see. But I think that is really kind of, you could replace the samples here, cut samples, but I think it's, once the sample is in Groove Agent, that's intended to kind of do the sample editing here, as opposed to dragging the sample out from Groove Agent into the sample editor. So a lot of people would do the work in the sample editor and drag it in. But so I don't know a way off the top of my head. There may be a way. I'm sure you could go into, the folders here and say, okay, maybe I'm looking for instruments and I have this crash, and here you could see kind of the whole path of it. But I think this is also the intention's also to kind of a form of copy protection for the kits. But let's say if I just do this to like a user sample, I'll just cut this. And I'll drag a sample in. But I think that's really kind of the intention of it. Okay, so if you come over here, you could right-click on the sample and reveal in Finder, and then be able to drag that to the sample editor if you wanted to. But I think that's kind of the intention of it. But maybe someone else knows. All right, so we see Kim please Cubase be a subscription based because I love it, but I still can't afford it. It'll be nice to pay in monthly subscription. So, when we've done our research, when we announced our, that we were going to be changing the license management, I mean, people resoundingly didn't want a subscription service, and people were already mad at us, even though we said it wasn't going to be a subscription service, that most people didn't want that. There's currently promotions going on. So there's the studio weeks going on right now. So, maybe consider using your credit card, or, many dealers will have like installment plans for purchases. I know like in the United States, a popular mail order place, Musician's Friend, often has. I haven't bought anything there, but when I see their catalogs, it's 4 easy payments of this for your product. So so maybe look at some other financing, but there currently is like a 40% promotion. So if money is tight, consider taking advantage of the Studio Weeks promotion. So if you wanted to get Cubase, Elements, you get that at a discount. You get Cubase Artist at a discount, or if you buy Cubase Artist, you can basically get Cubase Pro. So take advantage of the 40% off promotion that's currently going on. So all right, so I just see, is it possible to make a macro to create cycle markers for multiple individual events and then name each cycle marker the same as the name it's positioned over? So I don't know a way to kind of copy the names, but let's say if we had a number of different events that we wanted to make cycle for, like cycle markers based around. So let's say if I come here, and I will just kind of, so let's say I wanted to take each of these and name the cycle marker and move. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we'll create a macro, and a macro is a series of key commands. So I want to, let's see if I've maybe created this macro before. All right, well, I'll just do it again. So let's do new. So I want to, so let's say we'll navigate left. So I'll come here. And I'm going to add that command. So I'm going to select. And then in the macros, we're going to choose add. And then I want to do transport locators to selection, add. And then I think there's an insert and name. Insert and name cycle marker. So let me just add it this time. Sorry. So I don't know a way to extract the name automatically, but if you want it to do this, I could say, okay, I want to, and then I'll go to my macro and we'll say, add in name cycle. So now I can come right over here, give it a name. And then if I just do this again, give it a name, and run the macro again. So while it doesn't extract a name from the part, you can just kind of type the name or copy the name from here. So let's say if so if you wanted to automate that process, you could select, the track name, copy, and once we're here, let's do the macro again, add and name cycle marker, and then paste. I'm not sure if that's going to be done directly. So you could copy from the description field and then paste that. So if you don't want to have any typos, but I don't know a way to automatically move to that and copy the name. I think I've tried several times. But that could speed up the process for you. So once again, the macro, if you wanted to look at it, is we go to your key commands and just add a name cycle. So just navigate to the right. So just like the right arrow, transport locators to selection, marker, insert, and name cycle marker. All right, so we have Theory checking in from Paris. Thanks for joining us. I see Terry Dean saying you went into computer networking because of Cubase or network engineering. All right, so I just see all right, I think my chat field jumped on me. Sorry about that. Okay, so I think I'm close now. Okay, so anyone have any insight how to convert a Groove Agent SE sample into a sample track so I could play with different pitches on piano keyboard? So, once, if you have just a sample here, so let's say if I go to my media and I just was going to loops and samples and, if I want to go to laser beams, I wanted this sample. So let's say if I want that sample, I could create a sampler track. And now that I could play it across the computer keyboard, if you were doing this inside a Groove Agent, another method to do this inside a Groove Agent and so say I just want to take that kick. I'll drag my kick to the sample. And if you go to pitch, you could click on key range and you can say, okay, I want this to play from C1 to C2. And now, or let's say C1 through C3. And that will kind of automatically just pitch the samples so you can play it from a computer keyboard as well. So try just clicking on the sample here, and then you could click on the pitch tab and set the key range, or you could have it be a fixed pitch. So it'll only be the same pitch across different keys, or to be different pitches, just like that. Okay, just reading through more questions. So thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we have a question. How do you choose the active lane in a track? I suppressed it by mistake, and now the remaining lanes have MIDI notes but can't be heard. All right, so let's say if it's MIDI, just do new project here. So all right, so let's say, I've done a MIDI recording. All right, so sometimes MIDI recordings can be a little different. So let's say if I come here and I put this into like a cycle record, depending on your MIDI record modes. So I think by default it's set to new parts. So when I come here, let's say, okay, I'll just put this into a quick record. I'll activate the cycle. All right, so now I'll say. All right, so I have basically 4 different lanes. I could select between the different takes by clicking on the bottom. So you could do that. So if I wanted to, let's say I want to go to take 3. So that's one way. You could also just open up the lanes in the editor here. So you'll see on the track, the lane in each of the recordings can be chosen directly there. Now, if you wanted to just merge all those, which is a common thing, maybe you start with kick, drum, and then add snare and hi-hats and other percussion. If you grab the glue gun and hold down, I think the Alt or Option key, that can now merge all the takes together. So if you want to now, and I won't hit record this time, but just play. So again, if you wanted to just come over here and merge all those different takes together, now we could unmute. And my 21st century composer, watch out, but you could switch to the lanes. So if I undo that, you could select in the bottom center to select between the lanes. You could open up the lanes view here, or if you want to merge, hold down the glue gun, and at that point hold down Alt or Option and click on the event, and all the different takes will be merged together. All right, so we have Alex checking in hi, and we see that Graham Witchers made it from Royal Wootton Bassett in the UK. He's getting ready to start his weekend. So I just see we should invite Charlie Steinberg to these Hangouts. He definitely would like it. It's 3 years older than me, I found out. Yeah, so Charlie's a wonderful guy. I got to see him on a Zoom meeting maybe about 10 months ago. So it was just really good to see him. One of my favorite people. All right, so we have a question. Is there a way to link a tracks that's already linked? Example, I want to include linked overheads left and right to a whole drum set. Okay, let's take a look. All right, so let's say I have all of these linked except for my overheads. So I will link this. Okay, so now all these are linked. So I think now if I wanted to see, now I've selected those two and I wanted to make it link one. So these will still be linked. So I will unlink the channels and now relink with the new channels and then hit OK. And now all the drums. So once you have kind of the link group, you know, you could leave it as is and then choose to unlink and then include the other channels and relink. And if you just leave those linked, you won't have any changes to the original. Now all the channels can be linked. To see from Christian D68 you know, I think there's only one in the world who seems to remember everything, Greg. So I just had to learn all the new features for all the new versions for 30 years. So, but I'm sure there's other people know better than I do. So. All right, just reading through. More comments. Okay, just reading through. So more comments. We'll find questions coming up, I'm sure. Okay, so we have, I see a question. I have a Yamaha PSR E423 keyboard. It has USB, but I don't think it does MIDI. Anyone know what the USB is intended for? So, it probably is a USB MIDI interface just so that you can use the PSR keyboard as a controller for like a DAW program like Cubase. So, I'm pretty sure that if you connect it to your computer and install, I'm not sure if it's class compliant MIDI driver or you just need to install the Yamaha USB driver, but you could, play virtual instruments in Cubase and, send MIDI from the keyboard into Cubase and send MIDI out of Cubase to the keyboard over that USB connection. And you could use it as a controller to play software instruments. All right, so we see Randy Schaefer just switched to Cubase from Waveform 11 and Reaper, and he's loving it, so it's great. Welcome to the live stream, and welcome to Cubase as well. All right, so I just saw what is Nectarine. So I think Nectarine is a plugin from Nectar. So let's see if I could find a question again. So yeah, I believe it's a plugin from Nectar. So the company makes the controllers. Okay. Just reading through lots of discussion today. So I see Zofo saying some of the stuff he's showing is pro only, so grab it while it's on sale. And big smiley face, and he says, I did. So, all right. So we see Jay from checking in from Atlanta. Glad you could join us. All right. And we see Brian Sawyer just joining from North Carolina. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. How do you set Cubase to remember the pressed notes of a MIDI keyboard? So really all you have to do is, record it. So, if I come over here to an instrument track, so say I'll just go over here to this project. So if I have like an electric piano VST instrument loaded up, and really all I have to do is come right over here and choose. Excuse me, I just got a quick message. Okay, so, so I could see, when I play notes on my MIDI keyboard, that I could see it reflected here. And if I wanted to just record that information, all I had to do is come right over here and all right, and now everything that I just recorded, everything I just played was recorded directly in. So that's all you had to do. To have Cubase remember the pressed keys of a MIDI keyboard, just record it as hit record on a MIDI track, and it'll be captured for you in the sequencer. All right, so reading more comments here. All right, so I just see a comment from Graham Witcher. It says, I wouldn't be able to say what my favorite feature in Cubase Pro. There's so much. However, this may surprise folks. I just love the actual look of it. The colors, the zones, just beautiful. Yeah, so we have our own kind of software interior designer. So, all right, I'm going to blow off a call from Fred Corey for you guys. I'll have to call him back after the live stream. So he's a drummer in Cinderella and a composer as well. Great friend. All right, so I just see I struggle to set up ambisonics with loudspeakers in Cubase 11 Pro. So generally, when doing ambisonics, to get kind of the spherical aspect of it, once you have an ambisonics project, it's going to be done in headphones. So you want to kind of get the sense of working with headphones. And I think that's how the algorithms, I'm not an ambisonics genius by any means, but I think if we just want, one of the big things is as we're working with it, that you want to, once you have kind of the ambisonics, you want to have the ambisonics decoder set up in the control room in the headphones, so that will be able to kind of decode. And so it could be tricky. I think it's really intended to kind of work, with headphones from my understanding, but I could be mistaken. Okay, so I see Jay's mentioning a great point. So whoever's asking about Cubase cost, please know that if you're already using a DAW, that you have a great chance you'll be able to also save on a competitive cross grade. So that I think that's on sale as well for this month. So you could take advantage of that. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is it in Cubase 11 maybe 4-band oscillator synth? So if you want to come over here, let's do just a new project and look at Retrolog. So I think Retrolog you can do 3 oscillators, but you, I guess, let me just get the right instrument. So here you have 3 oscillators plus a sub oscillator and a noise generator. So you could technically say it's 5 oscillators, but we have kind of 3 separate oscillators with your sub and your noise generator. So all of those can be employed. That's standard with Cubase. Okay, so we just see from Mandy Lane, great to see you on the live stream. Can we have bigger text font in the sample browser for Cubase 12? I'll pass it along. I think, a lot of times it could be dependent upon like the screen resolution that you're working with. But let's say if we go to Media Bay, I think that's a pretty easy size to work with to not only for legibility. So let me know if this is if you want this to be bigger. So I'm running at a 1080p resolution, so 1920 by 1080, and I think that this is a pretty comfortable size. And I have bad vision. I've had multiple eye surgeries and stuff over the years. But I could read this even without my eye that I don't wear a contact lens in. So, but let me know if Mandy, if this is the area that you think is too small, and I could pass it along. But I think that's pretty comfortable size for being able to see, because many times people are looking at hundreds or thousands of different samples, and to see, and it's the balance of being able to see a lot of data, but also being able to read it. But let me know if that seems too small to you, and if other people want to chime in, I'd be happy to kind of pass that along as feedback. Okay, so see, why is my DAW crash? Cubase 10.5 and 11. So it's not a lot of information, but if you could let us know if it's if you're employing third-party plugins or if it's just stock Cubase components. A lot of crashes are going to be dealing with third-party plugins. So if you could just let us know what exactly it is, what your sessions are, what they're involving. But often third-party plugins could be culprits for kind of odd and unexpected crashes like that. Okay, reading through more comments. Okay, reading through more comments. Okay, so I just see how do I get my purchased instructions to be shown in Hallian 6? So I will assume that this is purchased instruments. So once you have the instruments purchased, all right, so we see FC on the live chat. We have Fred Corey joining us. So I think I'll see his comments coming up. So I just got a text from him. All right. All right. So the purchased instruments. So what you want to do is if you don't see them, so make sure that they're not there already. So when you go to like an instrument track, so let's say I go to, and I'll add a Hallian. Okay, so now I'm going to click on load, and I'll just see here like my, where if you click in this little blue area here, we could see all of the different instruments. So if you purchased an instrument like, Vibrant, you can come over here, double click, load it up, and then it shows up and it'll be kind of a Hallian based instrument and run within Hallian. So we'll just get this loaded up here. So now if I wanted to play my clavinet, just kind of come over here. This is kind of a bigger sample, but at that point, we could. All right, just got an email from Dweezil Zappa. So, so at that point, we click on the macro and we could see, the different, user interface. So if you're not seeing it when you go to load and then click on your instrument family here, then that would indicate that it's going to be, you could go to the Steinberg library manager. So let's get to the library manager here. And this is a utility that you'll get with Cubase or Hallian for installing. Go to the Hallian library. So see if you see it listed here. If you don't see it, wherever you downloaded it to, double click or right click on it'll be a .vst sound file. Right click on it and say open in Steinberg library manager. And that will make the link for you so that you could see your instruments inside of Hallian. All right, great to see Vinny Sabatino back from Orlando. So glad you could join us. All right, so we have a question. Can we save a VST channel strip along with plugins and open the same in another session? So let me add an audio track. I will come over here. Let's edit the audio track. So let's say I want to have EQ. I want to have my channel strip. And I wanted to have another plugin as an insert. Let's make that a squasher instead. Okay, so if I liked all of these settings and I wanted to open it into another project, all I'd really have to do is to come right over here and we'll just right click and say save track preset, and we'll call this July 23rd, 2021. Okay, so I hit OK. I can come directly over to, let's get to my media bay, and I want to go to user presets. Let's go to track presets, audio, and then I see my July 23rd, 2021 preset. I could drag that over. Let's just create a new track with that. So now when I open up this track, I'll have my EQ set the same, my channel strip, and the plugins all configured. So just right click on the track and save as track preset. Go over to your media bay, go to user presets, track presets, audio, and you'll see it right there. And you could use that in any project. All right, let me just read through some more comments here. Thanks for all the great questions. You see Michael Team still giving away some more ice cream. So generous. All right. You see Gareth is going to steal my melody. All right, so we see Mandy Lane likes the new Cubase update, especially with the automation. Now you have better ways to automate the plugins. That's great. So we see from Jeff Zabelski, Greg, some articles from the support page suggest not using proprietary drivers, mouse, keyboard, sound, etc., and to let Windows use its own by default to avoid conflicts. So I haven't really felt the need to, I use kind of a generic mouse, generic keyboards. I haven't really had to or felt the need to use like a proprietary mouse driver. I just kind of plug it in, it works, and kind of so they can be problematic sometimes, but so if it's not doing what you want, you can give it a try. If it's causing problems, then kind of revert to the generic driver. I see just a comment from Randy Lee's like shame about Cinderella's guitarist and keyboardist. Yeah, passing away. So yeah, it was just really tragic. I think we knew that Gary Corbett, who's a Cubase user, a longtime Cubase user, that he had been ill for a little bit, but I think it was pretty shocking. It happened kind of on the same day. So we'll miss both of those guys. Okay, so we just see, how do I get instruments I purchased to show up in Halion 6 on my M1 Mac? So, make sure first off that it's been downloaded. So if you purchased it, on a previous computer, you could just go to the download page. So if you go to the Steinberg download assistant and make sure that it's actually downloaded direct, that you have the content directly there. So once you have that downloaded, it should, when you do the installation, automatically make the association with the Steinberg library manager. But if you just installed Halion and you didn't go back and re-download, even if you have the licenses, you may just have to kind of come over to the VST instrument and plugins area and just say I bought Synergy and I really need to have that working, or I bought T guitar or M guitar, granular symphonies, so these different sound sets, and make sure that you have these re-downloaded on your M1 Mac and you should be good to go. Okay, just finding my spot. Thanks for all the great questions. right, so just an email came in with a question. We'll see if we can get to it towards the end. Okay, so we have a question from Randy Lee. Can you show again how to move buses to the right side of the mixer next to the main outputs? All right, so let's say I have, a number of tracks here. Okay, and I want to have, tracks that are fixed to the right-hand side. So if I want to see my buses, and let's say if I come here and I want to add group tracks. So let's say I want to come over here. Let's add 4 groups. Okay, and as I scroll on my mixer, that, my groups can, if I want those always to be kind of anchored to the right-hand side, what I do is click on visibility and then zones, and we'll see that we have 3 dots. So here I could say I want my master and my 4 groups to be anchored to the right. So now as I scroll, these particular channels will be just anchored directly over to the right-hand side. So again, click on the visibility tab, click on zones, and then at that point, you could just anchor particular elements to the right. So if I want my stereo out to the right, but I want audio track 19 to the left, we can kind of create a classic split console design. And so you can have it anchored to the left, in the center, or anchored to the right. Okay, so we have a question. What's the best high quality mix down settings? It sounds great while mixing, but after export, it sounds a little dull. Could you help, please? So, to maintain kind of the highest resolution, and we do our export audio mix down, make sure you could do, make sure that you're not changing the sample rate. You probably want it to be 32-bit floating point. And a standard WAV file. So if you're exporting it to like an MP3, something like that, and changing sample rates, that could affect the quality. So that's kind of the bit depth and resolution. Sometimes people will use their master volume in the mix console as like a monitoring volume. So if the level sounds low, try to build your gain structure of your mix so that your master fader is set to near 0 dB. Okay, so we have a question from Fred Corey. Hey, Greg, simple question. I finished a MIDI part. When I pull the file back to shorten it, I still hear the sound playing. This is only was when I shorten it, actually pull the actual part back or cut it. All right, so let me just create this scenario here from Mr. Corey. Great to see you on the live stream, Fred. All right, so we'll just do. All right, let me just check something here real quick. All right, I'll just go back to one of my other projects here quickly. right, so let's say. Okay, so let's say I have this part and I have some MIDI notes, and make sure I plug my laptop in here. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, so Fred's question. So I finished the MIDI part. When I pull the file back to shorten it, I still hear the sound playing. So let's go ahead and try that. So all right, so let's say if I wanted to do this in the middle of the phrase, let's see if the note will continue to play. Okay, so if it's doing that, Fred, probably what you need to do, try going to your preferences and go to editing and under MIDI to split MIDI events. So editing, MIDI, try to split MIDI events. And now even though this note is kind of hanging over, let's see what it does. All right, let me just adjust it again more time. So let's say now if we split the MIDI event, I'm going to just take my snap off. All right, so it could be that, so I know if we cut, let's say if I cut that note, so now if I cut that phrase, so that we could, once that's been cut, so check that preference, Fred, that you want to go to MIDI and split MIDI events and see if that does it. But there's also, I think there might be an option for it not, so to basically, have those events be muted, because it's sometimes these can become kind of almost orphaned parts. So maybe instead of rolling it back, try splitting the notes and erase. So now we do this, you'll just it'll end right there. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, I remember you saying something about being able to customize scales. Can you show us how to do that? So, yeah, so a lot of composers like to do this. So let's say if I go into my MIDI editor and we go to our scale assistant. So you see, okay, I want to, so I see editor scale. And at this point, you could just scroll down to set up musical scales, and you could create your own custom scale. So if you want to do like a Bartok half diminished scale, you could, put in your own scale and just have that be a selection. So you could create your own custom scale. So once again, double click from the MIDI editor and you'll see the editor inspector on editor scale. Click like on major, and then you could go down to the bottom and set up musical scales. And you could create your own custom scales. We see Gareth sending well wishes to people in Germany and Netherlands after the floods. That was pretty tragic to watch. Okay, reading through comments. Okay, so I just got an email. So let's see if I get to this quickly. Okay, so I just see a question. I'm using an expansion pack, and I use Groove Agent by drawing in one MIDI note that corresponds to a groove on Groove Agent pads. At least once a song, there is one cymbal hit that is at extremely high velocity. How can I maintain a steady velocity in such individual drum instruments to prevent it from happening? So the one thing that it might be that's causing that is, let's say if I go to Groove Agent, so it could be just on the patterns. So, you know, so let's go ahead and add in a quick instrument track. So this could be something you do before the patterns. So say, you know, but on the patterns, you're going to have like different options so that like every time, so you'll see under crash, you know, so try changing, you can maybe change this to off, just out of curiosity before dragging the pattern to the project, you know, and once you have that pattern kind of in, you know, the project, you could, let's just come right over here. Let's look at it in the drum map. You know, and one of the things that could also cause that as you drag patterns over is some of the MIDI notes could be shared. So let's say in Groove Agent, this could be the thing to check also, is you'll see this little MIDI icon here. So this way the pattern can have its own individual MIDI port. So try that before you drag it over as well and see if that helps you. I think that will kind of help with your situation between those two. Okay, so I just see Tech Talk with Sean says use GTX 1650 Intel i7 with 32 gigs of RAM and SSDs with SATA drives 9.5 and 10.5. When playing full screen video, the video stutters. Somehow an 8.5 video works without any problem. Anyone else face this? So a lot of times video, it could be down to, you know, the individual video files and the codecs that were used to compress, you know, the video files themselves. So many times that could be kind of the problem is with codecs, and, you know, in 8.5, I think it was, you know, still using the older video engine. So I think with version 10 initially they came out, or with 10.5, they came out with a brand new video engine. So that's going to be kind of different technology. So you might just have to, and if you go to this Steinberg website and just say, you know, to find the appropriate video container and codec for the video files, that you could get it to probably work. So it's probably just going to be a codec issue for the video. Okay, so I just see, how about track icons, color track icons? So let's come over here. Let's say I now want to come over here. So there are icons, but you could just simply come right over here. So these will be kind of black and white, but you could just do your own user icon. So if you want it to be like a, bass, you could just come right over here and just have your own personalized icons. So you could just double click and go to users and have that be any picture that you want. So you could do that already. All right, so just see Halion 6 is a Cubase version of Contact, which Steinberg would collaborate with more third-party like Contact does, but I get it. So, there are lots and lots of content coming out for Halion 6. I would say that Contact has more, but, I think that the feature sets with scripting and stuff are now pretty much on parity. So we're seeing lots of libraries coming out specifically for Halion as well. So, I think Halion has some catching up to do, but I think it's a really great option for sample developers because it could be used in, content in Halion, could be played back in Halion Sonic SE. So there's more users of that than any other software sampler in the world. Okay, so we have a question. Why do I get a missing note on my bass at the beginning of mixdown when using RX6 Clicker? So it's probably going to be, obviously related to the plugin, but a lot of those plugins may take a little bit of time to process. And when it's taking that time, it may actually, not process it correctly because some of those plugins will do that. So if you try with another plugin, I think that you'd probably find that it's going to be working as expected. So I think it's going to be, related to how, RX6 is doing the processing offline. All right, so I just see a question from Hello World. Does Greg answer questions the same day? So yeah, we will try to answer them. So all these questions I'm answering were asked today. Okay, so we have a question from Jeff Sabelski. When Cubase doesn't see the plugins or VSTIs, excuse me, the drop-down list shows 3 backward slashes in front of the name of the plugin list. So if it's generally going to be, let's say if we add an instrument here and we go and we see these 3 slashes, like what we see here, these 3 slashes, this is kind of indicative that's a VST3 instrument. So let me know if that's the 3 slashes you're referring to, Jeff. Okay, so we see Terry Dean saying he likes the Logitech MX keys and MX Master very much. So we see from Michael, would it be possible to have real faders for sends? So I know a lot of people that, will get, so when we do the sends here, generally they show up like a typical mix console where you'll have, more horizontal. So let's go to the sends here and I'll just add a quick effects channel. So you could, just have these, and this is pretty typical as opposed to faders just because of space on a console, and if you wanted to actually control them from live faders, if you wanted to, you could easily kind of do that with quick controls. And one of the presets that you'll have for quick controls will just be your sends level. So that way, if you have 8 faders, you could just connect those to your VST quick controls and have those automatically use faders for your sends. All right, we see Gareth is giving away a Yamaha RevStar 820 to Michael Pierce. That was generous of him. All right, just finding my spot. All right, so I think I'm back. All right, so we're seeing from Cubase Junkie, I like the Steinberg Raven and Eagle pianos with Hallian. If I didn't have Keyscape, I'd be using Raven and Eagle pianos. So yeah, they're great. All right, so you see from Jeff Sabelski, Greg, problem solving an issue on one solid VST track. I had a sound drop out in when I dug that MIDI file. When I drug that MIDI file into Nuendo, it split the file into 5 tracks with one that was a sysx track. Hidden parts? It could be. So, you know, if you have sysx, you know, that could be sending, you know, messages to the particular track that, you know, generally sysx is particular for a, you know, like one instrument and not kind of universal like most MIDI messages. So if it's having sysx, you know, if you try to, you know, filter out the sysx in that track, you could probably, you know, see if that makes a difference for you. All right, so reading through, so seeing discussion of what soft sense can kill your CPU. Okay, so I just see, hi Greg, how to hear the sidechain effect when the sidechain track is soloed. There's a workaround to duplicate the source track and set out to none, but is there a simpler way? Yeah, so, you know, I think, you know, so if, you know, so one method of doing this, and you mentioned kind of sending it to none. So let's take a look at it here quickly. Okay, so let's say if I'm here and I wanted to sidechain that kick and the kick with the actual file here. So all right, so let's say I think what we want to do is I'll come over here. Let's go to our inserts. to our compressor. Let's activate our sidechain. We'll choose our sidechain source. Okay, so it's going to be this kick. Okay, so let's say, all right, so if I want it to go to this kick, and let's say we go to the sends, we're going to see our side chain here. So if we want to solo, so if I didn't want to hear the kick but still have it side chain, I could take that kick and instead of to the stereo bus, send it to no bus. Then you could hear the without that, and so that's kind of the workaround. Let me just reread it again. But let's say if I route this output directly to the side chain and not use the send, let's see what that does. So let's say, so if you wanted to just route the output directly to the sidechain input, you could do that, and that would, instead of routing it to no bus, you could just route it there instead of sending it from the send. Let me know if that makes sense for you, Andy, or if that's just as awkward a workaround. Okay, reading through more questions. Okay, reading through more comments. All right, so we see Millard Brown's going off to work, and guess I'm about 20 minutes behind the question. Sorry I didn't give more of a barometer earlier. See comment for resizing fonts in Windows 10, you can go to display settings and change the scale in layout to 125 or 150%. So that may work. So Mandy, maybe give that a shot. All right, so we see Michael Teams is putting a raised floor in his studio. Okay, so I see from Hello World says, I don't drag the patterns into the sequencer, I just draw a single note. So try, if you're just triggering, and this for Groove Agent. So if you do that with Groove Agent, let me see if I have. Try to come over here. Let's load a kit with patterns. So try in the pattern editor just to turn the crash to off and see if that makes a difference. or not to always or to fill ending. So, but try setting it to off there for the crash and see if that helps you when you drag just a single note in to trigger the pattern. All right, so I see from Jay, I have my main area set up okay for my eyes, but it's really dark and Hallian, Groove Agent and stuff. How do I change the colors in those applications? So I'm not sure if it's so customizable for the plugins. So I don't think that it's so customizable for the particular plugins, but I'll mention that to the development teams as well, because we're always making sure that it's makes sense for non-visually for visually impaired people as well. Okay, so we have Norton checking in from Augusta, Georgia. So how do you split the soprano notes of a 4-part hymn to its own track? All right, so let's say just go back to another project here quickly. All right, so let's say all right, I'll just put it on the piano here quick. All right, so let's say I have something like that and I look at it in my score editor. So let's say I have 4 voices. So I think if we try going to the score editor and go to functions and explode, we can say to number of new tracks and then hit OK. That once we do that, that now each of the voices can be automatically split. So I could take like this piano part and the other ones, and now those can be split kind of into their individual voices. So try going like in the score editor when you see it. And so go to scores once you're there and functions to explode. And you could create the number of new tracks, split points if you want to do it to new tracks. So play around with that. And that will split each of the voices to their own track. All right. All right. Let me find the other parts of the question here. Sorry, my contact lens is being a little irritating today. Okay. Okay, so part 2, how to change 16ths to 8ths after an 8th note quantize in the part of the score. All right, so let's say I will just come here and I'll put in just a quick Okay, and I'll just put in some quick 16th notes in step entry mode. So let's say. Okay. Okay, so let's say put in 16th notes. Let me just jump to measure 51 here. Okay, so now when I look at this in the score editor, all right, so I'm not sure if you've done the display quantize, but if you come over here, we could just say, okay, I want notes to be 8th notes, and I could just do that. But let's say now I want these notes to be 16th notes. So you could kind of pick and choose the different parameters right here. So if you just kind of keep this open, so I want the first couple measures to be 8th notes. I want these to be, quarter notes. So that's how you could just, I want this to be 32nd notes or, 16th notes. So you could kind of pick and choose whatever you select to have that particular quantize value once you select the display quantize tool. Okay. Okay, reading through more comments and questions. Thanks again for all the great questions. So we have a question: does Hallion support sound font formats? So the full version of Hallion does. So if you wanted to, if we have Hallion, let me just add a Hallion instance. So Hallion will support a number of different sample libraries. So I think once you have like a sound font in, let me see if I remember the trick. But yeah, so I know that it will support it. I thought it was under maybe options. Let me. But I think once you kind of insert like an old sample CD, that at this point, that you have the access to, or if you go to the browser and just look in the browser for your sound fonts, that it should be recognized directly from here. So once you go to my computer, just navigate it to your sound fonts from there, and I think it's recognized that way. So I just see from Michael Pierce, just out of interest, when was the last UV22HR last updated? I don't need to have to dither much, and I usually use other plugins. Yeah, I know, but I just wondered how up to date it was. So it is It is the Apogee UV22 dithering algorithm. So, that algorithm hasn't been updated. So, the plugin's been updated to work with more contemporary operating systems, but it is doing this specific Apogee dithering algorithm. So that hasn't changed. So so the sound hasn't changed with that. Okay, so see some more discussion of sound fonts. Yeah, so they were popular 25 years ago, kind of when sound blasters were very popular. Okay, reading through more comments still. So I just see from Hello World, imagine going to school for using a DAW when you could just learn everything by watching these videos. Yeah, probably YouTube is the greatest library ever conceived, So you can probably get a lot of your college education watching YouTube videos too. I think all of Harvard's undergrad stuff is on YouTube. So all right, so we have a question. Is there a negative effect of having a lot of sidechain sends in a template, like sending all the shells to a stereo overhead and room and a drum for pumping the groove of the set? The one tricky thing could be there's no real negatives with doing it and kind of having things set up. The one tricky thing could be when you're doing like batch exporting and you're trying to do a batch export with utilizing sidechains. So you say, okay, I want to, export the bass with the sidechain and do stems. That's when it gets tricky, but otherwise there's no real cost or consequence to doing it. You just be aware that maybe you have to, do that separately if the case arises. Okay, read through more comments. I just see from Scott Bogfoot, and she says, if someone in chat answers my question, should I go back and remove the question so Greg doesn't have to answer it again? So you could leave it in, and it's for the benefit, and we could have perhaps a video demonstration as well for other people. So, but thanks for asking. So I could just see from Cubase Junkie, I didn't know Greg was a pianist. Yeah, I'm the worst keyboard player, and but I got through class piano in college, so that's all I needed to do. Yeah, bass is my primary instrument. Okay. Reading through more comments. So lots of great discussion today. So you see Kai Wen just mentioning he had a Sound Blaster Pro. And you see and a TerraTech card. I remember when those were new. Okay, so I just see it says backup seems to be getting harder with Cubase, mostly because I use Groove Agent and sample tracks. I like to back up projects to external HD at one point, and lately things are not coming up right, especially sampler tracks or a mess. Any suggestions? So the audio for the sampler track. So as soon as if I do a new project here. So when I create a sampler track, that is going to be stored in the project folder. So when we come over here, we'll go to our media menu and let's go to our pool folder. And as we look here, we'll go to audio and then it's just going to be here in the sampler track. So, so that's where it's going to be. And if you wanted that, and as soon as I drag it in, and this may be just one of the Cubase preferences when you go to editing to audio, that at that point you could automatically on import audio files copy all files to new projects. So this, as soon as I dragged in the sample track, it's automatically placed it into my project folder. So that's, so as soon as you do that, all of your files are going to be placed there and it'll be placed in the sampler track. So let's say, and then when working with Groove Agent, if you wanted to have all of those sounds and to archive those, all you have to do again is to come over here to, let's add an instrument track. So let's say we have Groove Agent and you've made your own custom libraries. Is just right click and export kit with samples, and you could place this directly into your project folder as well. Then back up your project folder and everything will be just included within your one particular project folder. All right, so we just had someone that wanted to check out the meter bridge in the mix console real quick. I think it's from Jazz Dude, said we should mention it. So let's come over here. So let's say we have a project and we want to see it in the meter bridge. And we have a couple questions that were sent in advance. So let's say I'm playing along here and I go to, so if you come over here, you could have your meter bridge on or off. And this meter bridge, we could have it do a number of different things. So if I want to see this as wave meters, so I could see what is actually coming. And if you wanted to make this really large, you want to have this just be separate. And again, just kind of right click in the meters. You got PPM meters as well. So if you want to input metering or post fader, post panner. So you can resize your meters or pretty easily like that. All right, so let's go to a couple questions I had sent in advance. We'll get to those. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned something. Okay, so all right, so this is from Jan. How to handle a delay preset that has low wet mix as a send effects. See attached screen dump. I think that several considerations must be taken into account when wet mix is low, about 30%. I want to use a delay as a send effect. It says he added his thoughts and conclusions that must be taken into account. Low level of wet mix just means that the effects header will strongly affect the level of volume, especially when the fader in get track is set to a low level. Shall you use post pre-fader instead to get mix track to handle the level it affects feeder effect level? Is it necessary to use delay presets similar to this as an insert instead of effect send? If true, when to handle the filter out frequency? I want to lose that spectra in the mix. So I would say if you're adding an effect send in, so some of the effects and presets may be tied directly and may be intended to use as inserts. I would say if you're going to use, let's say, an add an effects channel track here. So let's say I want to add a stereo delay. I'll come over here. Let's add this. That a lot of times we may see this default to 50%. And to do this, I wanted to do this as a send where we're taking the amount of the effect and blending that, I think it will give you kind of a generic setting and realize that, once you add a delay, so if you're going to do it as a send, I would then just, put the wet dry mix all the way to 100%. And, use the send level to blend between the dry and the affected signal. So once you do that, if you have that to 100%, that will make more sense. A lot of times, I tend not to use presets for delays. I will just, they're obviously good and make a lot of sense. I would tend to use more maybe presets for chorusing, modulation, flanging, and like reverb effects. But delays, I usually, keep them synchronized and have them set almost on a song by song basis. So, just a quick rule of thumb, when you add the effect, it's going to open up the effect plugins GUI by default, and there's a preference if you don't like that behavior. But if you're doing it as a send, just knock the mix to 100%. If you're doing it as an insert, leave it at its default lower value. And I think that's a pretty good way to approach it. Okay, so I just see, let's see, I have notes in my MIDI part that are all different lengths. Is it possible to have all notes in legato quickly? With no overlap or short notes? I do this a lot with like MIDI bass parts. So let's see if we can find a quick, MIDI bass part here. All right, so let's say a lot of times I do this on bass parts, and really all you have to do is you could, select a section. If you go to MIDI and under functions, just choose legato, and that will automatically extend the note out to the next note starts. So just go to MIDI to functions, legato. And a lot of times, this is why people, like when you're trying to sequence a bass part and people would apply compression just to kind of make sure that that foundation part of the bass doesn't just kind of collapse and all of a sudden, the whole track sounds like it's a bit untethered. Just come over here. You could select just particular regions, and go to MIDI and go to functions, legato. And then that will just kind of extend it out. So give that a try. All right, so we see the Steinberg will work with high DPI with Cubase. It seems some plugins and FXs not supported it. Any plans to redesign the old plugins like Logic does They redesigned, refreshed, and optimized the old plugins. So all the built-in Cubase plugins, I think maybe except for Curve EQ, which is kind of the Voxengo plugin, are high DPI compatible. And, it's going to be different on the Mac versus PC because everything is kind of set up for Retina display on Mac and you can't have it in non-high DPI mode. So, so if you have Cubase on Mac, everything is high DPI because it's running on Retina support. But on Windows platform, you can choose not to have it run high DPI to have more system resources available. So it's not really an apples to oranges comparison, no pun intended. So when you're kind of working with that, it's, the two operating systems handle it quite differently. So, and if it's third-party plugins, it's up to the plugin developers to offer high DPI support. We can make our application high DPI compatible and scalable, but if the plugin isn't doing it, then we have no control over how the other plugins manage their high DPI scaling. So we're not going to rewrite their code for them. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg. I have looked at panning tutorials online, but I can't seem to find a workout how to execute the effect I need. I want to make a vocal pan hard left to hard right and back and forth. I'm sure you're familiar with Led Zeppelin's Whole Lot of Love, where the song in the bridge pans hard left and hard right. Hope you can assist. So you could just do, pan automation. So let me just see. Let me just check visibility here, see if I have. Okay, so let's say I have a vocal here. You could just automate.
Hand in hand, walking tall, stepping over every wall and standing in a way.
So if I wanted to just come over here and just pan and just do automation. Just do it on another. I'll go to. I'll just open up the full version of this, and maybe I messed up the project. But you could just do automation of panning, but there's also just a complete auto panner plugin that you could use for this. So let me try this. So let's say I just want to take.
We could see a future grow together all the time. Hand in hand, walking tall, stepping over every wall and standing in a way. You were easy to love, easy to keep all those promises we made. There was no way we could know, will we ever understand the way that things would go? Can you feel it now? Was it meant to be?
All right, so say if I just wanted
Will
to.
the memories all fade in time?
I mean, just doing kind of the panner like
Now
so.
that we've been apart, do you feel it in your heart? Can we really stay in love forever?
So, you're able to do just straight pan automation like that. You could also do some stuff like, okay, if I have this going to a group, so let's say I'll have this going to, I think this will be going to like our lead vocals group, and I'm going to just jump to our lead vocal group here.
Forever.
But you could also just pull up spatial and panner.
Cause I won't forget the love that I once knew. I remember you.
So under modulation, you can go to auto pan. So, and we could choose to have this.
Another love, another day. Somebody else could come along and steal your heart away.
So say I want this to be like quarter notes.
Baby, I don't know what I can do. Nothing stays the same. I wish there was another
And
way.
if you wanted this to be more,
If it means to you what it means to me,
you're going to do half
let's
notes.
not let this precious love slip away.
So, you could,
So baby, hold me near and chase away my fears. Together we can make this last forever.
so, you could do just kind of different panning, stuff like that. But, really kind of all like Whole Lot of Love is just kind of taking the panner and just kind of going back and forth like that. That's pretty much what they were using for that. All right, so I had a question from Nick sent in. Is there a way to back up all Cubase preferences? That includes my preferences, custom studio setup, generic remote settings, key commands, etc. So all you have to do is go to your edit menu and then go to Profile Manager and export your profile. And that will include everything. So if you're migrating to take all of your settings and how everything is set up to a friend's studio, to another studio, or migrating to a new PC, that's a great way to do it. So once again, edit and go to Profile Manager and export your profile. So let's see, how long would you say it would take to learn Cubase if you're using a bit every day? So, it really depends how you learn, but you could get functional quickly. I mean, the thing that I liked about Cubase, and it was obviously a much simpler program when I started, in 1991-ish, was that, I was actually doing a project and I got it home. I was in college, and ironically, my professors were hiring me to do like MIDI programming courses, MIDI programming projects for them while I was taking music industry courses from them. But I got it on a Sunday night and I really didn't read the manual, and I did a whole project on Monday and I made $150 profit just from doing that. So I became a fan of Cubase at that point. So, but you could definitely, just take one little task at a time and, learn a new keyboard shortcut every day. Every time that you go to every time that you come over here to use a menu, learn what the keyboard shortcut is and learn that keyboard shortcut and put it into your muscle memory, and that will speed things up. So you see that Gareth is my Salieri, stealing all my melodies, writing songs, coming out with cool records like Hot Mess next week on all major streaming services. 2 S's. All right. All right, so we see, does Cubase have a 4-band oscillator synth? So, you could use Retrolog, which is three oscillators plus a sub oscillator and a noise generator. We showed it a little earlier. Okay. sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Okay. So I just see Greg in Nuendo templates. What does the C7 in the end of the name mean? So it could be like in some of my projects, like where it says C7, like that might be like that project originated and hasn't been resaved under a different name since Cubase 7. So, I think Nuendo doesn't come with templates, but you could obviously build them. All right, so we have just a minute or two left. See if we get a couple more questions in. Thanks for all the great discussion. So once again, make sure that we won't be having our live stream on Tuesday because I have to travel to Los Angeles, but we will be having it on Friday. Okay, so we see they figured out the problem with the backups. All right, that's great. All right, so I just see I'll dream of that voice all night. So it's probably check out Seventh Crossing with Clay Oswald. It's kind of a lot of the members of Gloria Stefan's Miami Sound Machine. All right. Okay, so I think we're just about out of time. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy over the weekend. We'll be back next Friday. If you want to send me an email, I'd be happy to. I'll create a Zoom link for the meetup next Friday. Look forward to seeing everyone. But with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. And everyone, please stay safe and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for the questions, and we'll see everyone on next Friday. Take care.